At the center of the square, Sheriff Brennan stood beside a wooden platform that served as both market stage and pillory. Today, it held a man. "What's happening, Mama?" Lily whispered, rising on her toes. "Hush, Lily," Elena murmured absently. The square buzzed with ugly excitement that made her skin crawl. Even from the crowd's edge, Elena could see the prisoner was enormous. Tall enough that Brennan barely reached his shoulder, broad across the chest despite the obvious ravages of imprisonment. Iron shackles bound his wrists, dark with rust and blood. His clothes hung in tatters, revealing more wounds than whole skin. "Behold!" Brennan called out. "A northern raider caught stealing from the king's lands. His people had 3 days to ransom him. No gold has come." A murmur ran through the crowd. Excitement, fear, disgust, all mingled together. Elena found herself pushing forward, drawn by something she couldn't name. "The law demands restitution," Brennan continued. 6 silver coins or this man's service until the debt is paid. Who will bid?" The prisoner's eyes scanned the crowd with cold assessment. They were startling blue, like winter sky, and held no trace of fear. "Come now," Brennan taunted when no one responded. "He's strong as an ox." Not while bleeding all over, Elena thought. The prisoner swayed almost imperceptibly, fighting to remain upright. Dark stains beneath him spoke of wounds still weeping. "If he doesn't murder us in our beds," the baker called out. Several people laughed and jeered. A young apprentice hurled a stone that struck the prisoner's wounded shoulder. He flinched. The crowd roared approval at this first sign of weakness, and Elena's hands clenched into fists. The casual cruelty made her sick. The prisoner's eyes found hers, and she saw dignity, pain, and quiet defiance in those winter blue depths. 4 silver coins, Brennan announced, dropping the price when the jeering continued. No bids came. Elena couldn't look away. Behind his stoic expression was a person suffering, trying to maintain his humanity while being treated like an animal. As his torn shirt shifted, she saw his wound, located on his left shoulder. It wasn't just bleeding. The flesh around it was wrong somehow, discolored with veins of silver black that spread like poison across his skin. She'd never seen anything like it. And she was a healer. "He's dying," Elena realized, standing there with his back straight. But he's dying if no one helps him. 2 silver, then, Brennan announced. "Still no takers." 1 silver. Surely someone... "I'll take him." The words fell into sudden silence like stones into still water. Elena felt every eye turn to her. "Elena," Brennan said, carefully controlled, though she knew he must be enraged. He wanted to be rid of the prisoner, yes, but not at the expense of his late brother's widow. 1 silver coin, Elena said, reaching into her purse with trembling hands. "You said final offer." "Mama," Lily whispered, with excitement rather than fear. 1 silver is all I have anyway, Elena continued, pushing through the crowd. The prisoner watched her approach with something that might have been wonder. Brennan's face went red. "Elena, I forbid this. You cannot forbid anything," Elena said quietly, mounting the platform steps. She held out the coin. "I claim him according to law." Brennan looked as though he might refuse, but they were surrounded by witnesses. He snatched the coin with barely controlled fury. "So be it," he said through gritted teeth. "But when he murders you in your sleep, don't come crying to me." Elena turned to face the prisoner. Up close, she could see the full extent of his injuries, cuts and bruises that spoke of rough treatment. Yet, he held himself with dignity. "Can you walk?" she asked. His brow furrowed, then he spoke for the first time. The words were liquid and musical, completely incomprehensible. Gaelic. He was speaking Gaelic. Elena's blood went cold. Highland. She'd just purchased a Highland prisoner. "Highland dog," someone spat from the crowd. "Should put him down like the rabid beast he is." Elena felt every eye boring into her. the weight of their shocked judgment. "He's a man," she said sharply, loud enough for all to hear. "A wounded man who needs healing, not your hatred." Brennan roughly unlocked the shackles. "A Highland savage. He's your problem now, Elena." Elena ignored him, offering her arm to support the prisoner as he stepped down. He was even larger than she'd thought. She barely reached his shoulder. But he accepted her aid with careful dignity, murmuring something in Gaelic that might have been gratitude. "Come," she said simply, hoping her tone would convey safety. "Let's get you home." Chapter 1. The walk home. The walk from the market square to Elena's cottage should have taken 10 minutes. Instead, it stretched into an eternity of second-guessing and growing dread. What have I done? The Highland prisoner leaned more heavily on her arm with each labored step, his breathing increasingly ragged. "Mama," Lily chirped, practically bouncing. "Ask him if he's really been to the Great Locks. I heard Highland locks are so deep they have monsters in them." "Lily," Elena said sharply, then caught herself. "Don't speak to him." Her daughter's face fell. "But why not? He's going to be living with us, isn't he?" Elena's step faltered. Living with them. Heavens, what was she supposed to do with him? "He's not living with us," Elena said. "He's coming so I can treat his wound. Nothing more." The prisoner made a sound, something between a grunt and words. "See?" Lily said triumphantly. "He's trying to talk to us. Lily, stop!" But her daughter was already moving closer to the stranger. "You're very tall. Are all Highland men so big?" The prisoner's gaze shifted to Lily, and something in his expression softened. He spoke again, his voice gentler. They reached the outskirts of the village now, where cobbled streets gave way to dirt paths, and houses grew smaller and more scattered. Elena's cottage sat at the very edge, close enough to be part of the community, but far enough that her herb garden and occasional strange visitors wouldn't cause too much gossip. Though there will certainly be gossip now, she thought grimly. The prisoner had grown steadily heavier against her side, and Elena could hear the harsh rasp of his breathing. "Almost there," she murmured. Just as her cottage came into view, the prisoner stopped walking. His blue eyes were fixed on the cottage, then the forest beyond it, then back to her face. She could practically see him calculating distances, odds of making it to the tree line. He's going to run, she realized. Elena found herself stepping back, releasing his arm entirely. "You can go," she said quietly. "If that's what you want to do, go." He stared at her, clearly not understanding her words but catching something in her tone. Elena pointed toward the forest, then made a shooing motion. "Go! I won't stop you." The prisoner stared at her, his gaze flickering to the beckoning trees, then back to her face. Elena stepped back further, even turning slightly toward her cottage as if to give him privacy for his escape. Part of her, the practical, frightened part, hoped he would. It would solve so many problems. But as she watched him from the corner of her eye, she also felt a stab of guilt. His face had gone ashen beneath its tan, and sweat covered his brow. He'll die out there alone. And I'll have let him. The prisoner straightened as much as his injuries would allow, nodded once at Elena with what might have been gratitude, then turned decisively toward the forest. On the third step toward his freedom, his knees buckled. He collapsed face first into the dirt path. "Is he dead?" Lily asked, rushing forward. Elena pressed her ear to his chest, relief flooding through her at the sound of a heartbeat. "No, he lives. Help me get him inside." It took both of them to drag the unconscious Highland prisoner the final few yards to her cottage door. By the time they wrestled him through the doorway and onto the floor of her small front room, Elena was breathless. She knelt beside him, studying the strange wound on his shoulder in better light. The silver-black discoloration had spread since she'd first seen it, creeping down his arm and across his chest like frost on glass. What manner of poison could do this? "Mama?" Lily's voice was small now, uncertain. "What do we do with him?" Elena looked down at the unconscious man sprawled across her floor. There were old scars on his hands and arms that spoke of a warrior's life, but also calluses that suggested honest work. What have I done? But this time, as she rose to gather her healing supplies, the question felt less like despair and more like determination. Whatever she had done, she was committed now. And this man, enemy or not, Highland savage or not, was going to live if she had anything to say about it. Chapter 2. The Fever. Elena had dragged the unconscious Highland prisoner as close to the hearth as she dared, spreading her thickest blankets beneath him on the stone floor. By flickering firelight, his wound looked even more sinister. She knelt beside him with her herb basket, crushing willow bark between her palms and breathing in the bitter scent. Start with what you know. Treat the fever first, then the pain. Then what? She had never seen anything like this poison before. "Lily, I need you to gather some elderflower from the garden," she said without looking up, "and see if there's any birch bark near the old stump." "Mama," Lily's voice was small. "Maybe you should—" "Don't say it," Elena interrupted. "You don't know what I was going to say." Elena finally looked up at her daughter's face. "I know exactly what you were going to say, and you know what my answer would be. Remember what we discussed?" Lily's shoulders sagged. "We don't talk about it. We pretend like it doesn't exist." Yes. Some knowledge was too dangerous to acknowledge, even between mother and daughter. The hours passed in careful, methodical work. Elena brewed teas and prepared poultices, cleaned the wound with boiled water and honey, tried every remedy her grandmother had ever taught her. But the Highland prisoner remained deeply unconscious, his breathing shallow but steady. As darkness fell, Elena sent Lily to bed. She herself dozed fitfully in her chair beside the hearth, starting awake every time the fire popped. Suddenly, a sound made her eyes snap open. Harsh, labored panting. The Highland prisoner was awake, or something like awake. Elena could see the rapid rise and fall of his chest, hear low sounds of distress escaping his throat. "Easy," she murmured, reaching for the cup of willow bark tea. "You need to drink this." She slipped one arm behind his shoulders, trying to lift him enough to get the liquid past his lips. His skin was burning hot, and she could feel the tension in his muscles. "Please," she whispered, tilting the cup toward his mouth. "Let me help you." His eyes snapped open. Elena gasped, nearly dropping the cup. Because where winter blue had been before, now blazed molten gold. Something fierce and wild and utterly inhuman. "What? How are your eyes—" Before she could finish, his hand shot up to cup her cheek, stunning her silent. His palm was fever-hot against her skin, calloused fingers tracing the line of her jaw. He spoke, voice rough with delirium, words that poured over her like honey. She couldn't understand them, but the tone was tender, wondering. "I don't understand," Elena whispered. His golden eyes searched her face with desperate intensity. Then, slowly, as if drawn by something beyond his control, he leaned closer. A protest formed on Elena's lips as he drew nearer, but it died when his nose brushed along the column of her throat. She heard him inhale deeply, as if feeding on her scent, alone. The sound he made then was barely human, a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through his chest and into hers. "What are you—" Elena began, but the words died as his lips found the sensitive spot where her neck met her shoulder. For a moment it was almost tender, almost human. Then his teeth sank deep into her flesh. Elena's scream caught in her throat, emerging as little more than a strangled gasp. Pain lanced through her, sharp and shocking. But even as she tried to pull away, his arm came around her waist, holding her against him with impossible strength. "Why aren't you moving?" her mind screamed. "He's hurting you. Fight him." But the pain was already changing, transforming into something else entirely. Heat spread from the bite through her veins, and suddenly she couldn't tell if she was trying to escape or press closer. Her hands found his shoulders, meaning to push him away, but her fingers only curled into his shirt as unfamiliar sensations coursed through her body. She felt his tongue against her skin, warm and rough, and realized with distant shock that he was licking blood. Her blood. The knowledge sent another wave of that strange, overwhelming heat racing through her limbs. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. The Highland prisoner's golden eyes rolled back, and he collapsed against the blankets, unconscious once more. Elena swayed where she knelt, one hand pressed to her bleeding neck, staring down at him in shock. What just happened? She stumbled to her feet on unsteady legs, moving toward the basin of water by the window. Elena wet a cloth and pressed it to the wound, wincing at the sting. The bite marks were deep but clean, already beginning to clot. They would heal, she told herself. They would heal, and she would pretend this had never happened. But even as she cleaned the blood away, she could feel something changing inside her. It started as a warmth in her chest, spreading outward like ripples in a pond. Then the warmth became heat, and the heat became fire. Suddenly, her entire body felt as though it were burning from within. Elena gasped, gripping the edge of the basin as her knees threatened to give way. The pain drove her to the floor. It was as if every bone in her body was breaking and reforming, every muscle tearing and rebuilding itself. She tried to scream, but no sound emerged, her throat locked tight against the agony. What did he do to me? The question followed her down into darkness as consciousness fled, leaving her crumpled on the floor of her own cottage, blood still staining her throat. Chapter 3. The Awakening. Elena woke to Lily shaking her shoulder frantically. "Mama, Mama, wake up! He's dying!" Elena struggled to consciousness, her body aching as if she'd been thrown from a horse. Memories came flooding back, the golden eyes, the bite, the searing pain that had driven her to darkness. Her hand flew instinctively to her neck, expecting to find torn flesh and dried blood. Instead, her fingers found skin that was whole, with only the faintest tender spots to mark where teeth had broken flesh. How is that possible? The wound had been deep enough to bleed freely, and yet now it felt nearly healed. Did I imagine it all? But no, the tenderness was real. When she pressed lightly, there was an odd sensitivity that sent an unexpected shiver through her. Not pain exactly, but something else entirely. "Mama!" Lily's voice brought her sharply back. "Hurry!" Elena quickly arranged her hair to fall over her neck, hiding any trace of what had happened, then turned to look at the Highland prisoner by the fire. Her breath caught. Lily was right. He was dying. There was no other way to describe the gray pallor of his skin, the barely perceptible rise and fall of his chest. A deep, gnawing anxiety rose within her. Suddenly, the idea of him dying felt unbearable in a way that made no sense, as if something inside her was screaming that she couldn't let this happen. The panic was overwhelming, far beyond what she should feel for any stranger. "What's happening to me?" "What do we do?" Lily whispered. Elena knelt beside the dying man, pressing her ear to his chest. His heartbeat was there, but so faint she could barely detect it. "Mama." Lily's voice was very small. "You have to do the thing." Elena's head snapped up. "What thing?" "The thing that we don't talk about," Lily replied. Elena gaped. "We don't talk about it for a reason, Lily. You know what happens to women like us if anyone finds out." Lily's eyes grew wide but determined. "But he's dying, Mama. And you're crying." Elena touched her cheek and was shocked to find it wet with tears. When had she started crying for a man she barely knew? She sighed, remembering her grandmother's words. "The gift is more curse than blessing, child. It draws attention we cannot afford. Keep it hidden always." Exposure meant death, not just for herself, but for Lily. But looking down at the man whose breathing grew shallower with each moment, Elena realized she had already made her choice. "Check the door," she said. "Make sure it's barred. And close the shutters completely." Elena knelt beside the Highland prisoner and placed her hands over his wounded shoulder. She closed her eyes and reached deep within herself to the place she had kept locked away since childhood. The warmth started in her chest just as it always had, a gentle heat that spread down her arms and into her palms. When she opened her eyes, soft light emanated from her hands, golden and pure. But the moment her magic touched his wound, Elena gasped in shock. There was something else there, something dark and malevolent that seemed to recoil from her healing light. The poison wasn't natural. It was actively fighting her gift, trying to consume both the healing energy and the man beneath her hands. What manner of weapon could do this? But beneath the darkness, she sensed something else entirely. Power. Wild, primal energy that felt ancient and somehow familiar. It called to something deep in her soul, something that recognized it as other. Like her, but different. As her magic encountered his, there was a moment of recognition, a touching of two energies that shouldn't exist in the world of men. His power felt like wilderness and moonlight, and for just an instant it felt like home. The dark poison seemed to recoil from their combined energies. Elena watched in fascination as the silver-black veins began to fade, retreating back toward the original wound. "You did it, Mama!" Lily threw her arms around Elena's waist. "You saved him!" Elena stared down at her hands, still glowing faintly with residual power. "Never again," she whispered, pulling Lily close. "Do you understand me? I can never use this gift again. It's too dangerous." "I know, Mama," Lily said softly. "I won't tell anyone. I promise." Elena was about to respond when a low groan drew her attention back to the Highland prisoner. His eyes fluttered open, clear blue now, no trace of the unsettling gold, and fixed on her face with confusion. He struggled to sit up, wincing as the movement pulled at his healing shoulder. His gaze moved from Elena to Lily, then around the unfamiliar cottage, his brow furrowing deeply. When he spoke, it was in rapid Gaelic, his tone questioning and wary. Elena caught the cadence of someone asking where and what, but the rest was lost to her. "Easy," Elena said softly. "You're safe. You were badly wounded." But the moment her hand touched his arm, his eyes snapped to her face with startling intensity. For a heartbeat, something flickered there. Recognition, wonder, confusion. Then it was gone, replaced by weariness. What had she done? She had exposed them both, risked everything her family had worked to hide for generations. And for what? A Highland stranger who would probably run back to his clan the moment he could walk. Chapter 4. The Growing Bond. By evening, the Highlander had regained some strength. He sat propped against the hearth wall, no longer gray with fever, but watchful. Elena found herself stealing glances at him, the way firelight played across his sharp features, how his blue eyes tracked her movements around the cottage. The weariness of the morning had been replaced by puzzled fascination as he looked at her, and Elena's cheeks warmed under his scrutiny. Worse, she nearly dropped the bowl of stew when their fingers brushed as she handed it to him. Her stomach fluttered at the touch, and she wondered if he'd felt it too. That jolt of awareness she couldn't explain. He said something quietly, his voice a low rumble. "You're welcome," Elena replied, though she wasn't certain thank you was what he'd said. They tried to communicate through gestures and single words. He pointed to himself and said something that sounded like Rowan. She repeated it carefully, earning herself a devastating smile. Then, clearing her throat, she pointed to herself. "Elena? Elena?" He repeated it, his accent wrapping around her name in a way that sent warmth spiraling through her chest. Lily had been unusually quiet through the afternoon, often moving to peer out the shuttered windows. Now she stood at the small gap between the wooden slats, her body tense. "Lily, come away from there," Elena said. "Supper's ready." "I keep hearing things, Mama," Lily said without turning. "Rustling, like something's moving in the woods." Elena frowned. Probably just a deer. The Highland stranger had gone very still at Lily's words. Even without understanding the language, he seemed to sense the tension. "I think," Lily's voice dropped to a whisper, "I think I saw a wolf." "That's impossible," Elena said immediately. "They avoid settlements." Rowan rose from his place, approaching the window. Standing beside Lily, he peered out into the growing darkness. For a long moment he was completely motionless, his breathing so quiet Elena could barely hear it. Then he made a sound that froze her blood. It was low and rumbling, coming from deep in his chest. A growl. Elena and Lily stared at him in shock, but he seemed unaware of their attention. His focus was entirely on whatever he saw or sensed beyond the glass. Elena pressed closer to the window, following his gaze. At first she saw only shadows and wind-tossed branches. Then something moved in the darkness between the trees, something large and four-legged. Then another. And another? "Heavens!" Elena breathed, her hand finding Lily's shoulder. "There are more of them." The shadowy forms were retreating, melting back into the deeper forest. Beside her, Elena felt Rowan relax slightly. Then a sharp knock at the door made them all jump. "Elena!" Brennan's voice carried barely contained anger. "Open this door!" Elena's heart sank, but she had no choice. Brennan pushed past her the moment the door opened, his eyes scanning the cottage until they fixed on Rowan. "He's still alive." Brennan's voice was barely controlled. "Elena, what did you do?" "I'm a healer," Elena said carefully. "I did what I had to. You said yourself at the auction that he was dying. Yet here he stands, whole and hale." Brennan's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "What manner of healing is this?" Elena kept her face carefully blank. "I used my herbs and my knowledge." "Don't lie to me!" Brennan stepped closer. "Don't you hear what people say about you, Elena? About the unnatural things?" "All right, you've seen that he's better, so you can go now," Lily interrupted, stepping boldly between Brennan and her mother. His attention snapped to the girl, his expression darkening. This child needs proper discipline, a firm hand to teach her respect. "Lily understands respect," Elena said sharply. "She is running wild," Brennan continued, moving toward Lily with clear intent. "Let me show you what a proper father would—" Rowan moved like lightning, flowing to his feet and placing himself directly between Brennan and Lily. He said, "It's nothing," but the look in his eyes was unmistakable. Brennan's hand moved instinctively to his belt knife. Rowan's response was to bare his teeth. "You dare threaten an officer of the king's law?" Brennan seethed, drawing his blade, but Rowan's hand shot out faster than thought, and suddenly Brennan was disarmed and backing toward the door with his own knife at his throat. "Enough!" Elena stepped between them. "Let him go. Brennan, he'll be gone by morning. I give you my word." For a long moment the two men stared at each other with barely contained violence. Then Rowan stepped back, tossing the knife to clatter on the floor at Brennan's feet. "See that he is gone," Brennan said, his voice shaking with rage. "If I find him here come dawn, I'll have him arrested." He shot Lily one last dark look. "And we'll discuss this child's need for proper guidance very soon." The door slammed behind him with enough force to rattle the walls. "You have to leave now," Elena said to Rowan, her heart still racing. He nodded, understanding clear in his eyes, despite the language barrier. He gathered his few possessions and followed her to the door. "Lily, stay inside," Elena instructed. At the edge of the forest, where darkness pooled beneath the ancient trees, Elena stopped. She turned to face him, trying to find words that might make him understand. "You can't come back," she said, gesturing toward the trees. "The sheriff, Brennan, he'll hurt you if you do." Rowan stepped closer. Without a word, he reached for her hand, lifting it gently to his lips. The kiss was soft, reverent, burning against her knuckles. Elena felt her breath catch. "Thank you," he said in careful accented English. The first English words she'd heard him speak. Then the trees around them rustled. Elena gasped. Wolves, massive and silver gray, were emerging from the shadows. Not just one or two, but dozens, surrounding them in a loose circle. Elena stumbled backward. A scream caught in her throat, but Rowan stood calmly as the beasts padded forward. He even gave them a brief nod. Then he turned to look at Elena, and in his gaze she saw regret before he disappeared. The wolves melted away around him like mist, and Elena was alone at the tree line, her hand still tingling from his kiss. Chapter 5. Dreams and Pain. The mist clung to everything, jagged peaks, heather-covered slopes, ancient stones. Elena walked through it all, her bare feet finding purchase on ground that seemed to shift with each step. Pain coursed through her body with every movement, sharp and relentless, as if her bones were trying to break free from her skin. She pressed forward anyway, drawn by something she couldn't name, deeper into the wild highland landscape that should have been foreign, but felt achingly familiar. Through the swirling gray, she heard a low growl from everywhere and nowhere. And then golden eyes materialized in the mist ahead. A wolf, massive and silver gray. "Wait!" she called out, her voice echoing strangely, but the creature began to lope away, always staying just beyond her reach. Elena followed. She had to reach it, had to understand. Elena jolted awake, but not in her own cottage. She lay in a bed far grander than any she had ever known. And as she turned her head, her breath caught. Rowan was beside her, his arm wrapped protectively around her waist, his blue eyes filled with tenderness. "My heart," he murmured, his accent wrapping around words she somehow understood perfectly. "You were dreaming again." Relief flooded through her so powerfully it made her dizzy. "I thought you were gone, that I'd never see you again." "Never," he said, catching her hand. "I told you, my heart. You are mine, as I am yours." My heart. The endearment sent warmth spiraling through her chest. "But it's been a month," she breathed. "A month of wondering, of hoping." "I'm here now," he said, rolling to face her fully. "I'll never leave you again." Elena melted into him, her body knowing his touch in ways her mind couldn't explain. And when he whispered against her throat in that musical Gaelic, calling her his mate, his heart, his very soul, she thought she might die from the perfection of it. "You belong to me," he growled softly, his teeth grazing the sensitive spot right where he had bitten her. "Say it, my heart. Say you're mine." Elena's eyes snapped open, this time for good. She was on the floor of her own cottage again, shivering in a cold sweat. Oh no, not again. She pressed her face to the rough wooden boards, trying to steady her breathing. For the past month, ever since the night Rowan left, Elena had been plagued by two things: the most vivid dreams of her life, and attacks of pain so severe they drove her to unconsciousness. The pain always started the same way. A deep ache in her bones, as if they were trying to reshape themselves. Then it would spread through her muscles, her joints, every fiber of her being, until she felt as though she were being torn apart from the inside. She would inevitably collapse, only to wake hours later feeling perfectly fine. Nothing hurts, she told herself. Indeed, the pain was completely gone, as if it had never existed. Perhaps that was the last of it. Perhaps whatever illness this is has finally run its course. But even as she thought it, she knew she was lying to herself. The attacks were getting stronger, more frequent. And always they were followed by those dreams. Dreams of mist and mountains and golden-eyed wolves. Dreams of Rowan holding her, touching her, calling her things that made her pulse race. Elena pushed herself to her feet, determinedly avoiding those particular memories. Lily, she called. Time to wake, sweetheart. Today is the day I meet with the king's court. Mama, do you think they suspect anything? Lily asked, emerging from her small room. Yes, Elena wanted to say. Brennan's suspicions had clearly reached royal ears, or she wouldn't have been summoned at all. It will be fine, she said instead. I'll tell them about grandmother's herb lore and be home by supper. Lily nodded, but Elena could see the fear in her daughter's eyes. They both knew what happened to women whose abilities were deemed unnatural. Be careful, Mama. Always am, Elena replied, leaning down to kiss her daughter's forehead. Bar the door until I return. Don't let anyone in, no matter who they claim to be. The ride to the royal castle took most of the morning, giving Elena plenty of time to rehearse the careful half-truths she planned to tell. She would speak of herbs and poultices. She would not mention the warmth that sometimes flowed from her hands. The castle rose before her like something from a tale. As a servant led her through corridors, Elena tried to ignore the way her heart hammered against her ribs. Just answer their questions. Tell them what they want to hear. The servant stopped before an ornate door. The king's apothecary will see you now. Inside, glass vessels filled with strangely glowing liquids lined wooden shelves. The air hung thick with herbs and something acrid that burned her nose. Ah, Mistress Elena, said a thin man in scholar's robes. Please sit. I am Master Aldrich, the king's chief apothecary. He looked up, and Elena's blood chilled at the intelligence in his pale eyes. I've heard fascinating reports about your abilities. Elena forced her voice steady. I know something of herb lore, passed down from my grandmother. Herb lore? Master Aldrich smiled coldly. Yes, that's what they all say, isn't it? I wouldn't know, she said carefully. Come now. His tone sharpened. Surely you're aware of what they call you, the witch woman who speaks to plants. Elena's heart hammered. People talk. Most of it is nonsense. Master Aldrich circled her chair. Then perhaps you can explain how a Highland prisoner, dying from a poison that should have killed him within hours, made a miraculous recovery under your care. Elena felt sweat bead on her forehead. Sometimes the body heals itself. In one night? His voice cracked like a whip. A wound black with corruption, suddenly clean and healing? Elena tried to calm her beating heart. Please, Master. I don't know what you think I did, but... Unexpectedly, the apothecary began to laugh. Oh, my dear woman, he said. You don't have to be afraid. There's something I need to show you. He uncovered a table at the far end of the room. A Highland warrior lay there, his skin bearing the same silver-black corruption she had seen on Rowan. For one horrible moment, Elena thought it was him. Then she saw the face and felt relief so intense it made her dizzy. Beautiful work, isn't it? Master Aldrich stroked the corpse's arm. Concentrated wolfsbane extract with certain alchemical enhancements. It killed that beast in hours. Elena stepped back. How can you speak of a human being this way? A human being? Master Aldrich looked puzzled. He wasn't a man. He was a beast, a wolf demon who refuses civilization. The king has decided if they won't bend the knee willingly, they'll be eradicated. And with my perfected formula, it won't be a problem. You're talking about genocide, Elena protested. I'm talking about pest control, the apothecary said. Which brings me to why you're here. You found an antidote to my poison. I need to know how. Elena frowned. I don't understand. The Highland prisoner you healed had been infected with this exact formula, yet he lived. Master Aldrich's eyes glittered. If I know how to counteract my own poison, I can make it even more effective. I won't help you murder people, Elena said, backing away. Oh, but you will. Master Aldrich's smile turned predatory. You see, I already know you use something beyond normal herbs, something that leaves no physical trace, but works nonetheless. The king is very interested in such talents. Elena's hand found the door handle behind her. Then I need supplies from the forest. Specific plants that don't grow in gardens. Of course you do, Master Aldrich called. and 2 guards stepped into the room. These men will escort you. Gather what you need, prepare your antidote, and return immediately. The king is eager to see a demonstration. In the forest, Elena walked between the guards, her mind racing with desperation. Elena! She turned to see Brennan emerging from behind an oak, his sheriff's badge glinting in sunlight. Sheriff Brennan, one guard said. Master Aldrich sent us to. I know what the master wants. He asked me to oversee this personally. You may return to the castle. But he said to bring her straight back. And you will. With me. The master trusts my judgment. After a moment's hesitation, the guards departed. I know what you're hiding, Brennan said quietly. You made no antidote to help that Highland savage. It was something else entirely. You told them about me, Elena whispered. Did you not think of Lily? Lily is exactly who I was thinking of. She needs proper education, discipline. Elena backed against a tree. You want to help her? Then leave us alone. I can help you both, Brennan said. The apothecary trusts me. Who do you think has been spreading his poison through the Highland territories? You! Elena's eyes widened. You've been murdering people. I've been serving the crown's interests, and I can protect you from the consequences of your gifts, if you'll let me. Elena's brows furrowed. How? Brennan smirked. Marry me. Our lands united, your reputation protected by my position. Lily would have a proper father, and you would have my protection. Never, Elena spat. You will, Brennan grabbed her arm. You will be my wife, and you will be grateful. Who else would have a witch for a bride? Suddenly pain hit Elena like lightning. Her bones began to snap and reform, the agony overwhelming. Brennan released her in shock as she collapsed. What is happening? A growl rose from the forest. Wolves emerged from the undergrowth. Dozens of them, led by a massive, silver-gray wolf with amber eyes. Sweet Mary, Brennan whispered, reaching for his sword. The pack attacked with precision. Through her agony, Elena saw the silver-gray wolf approaching, its golden eyes fixed on her with concern. The wolf from my dreams, she thought as darkness claimed her. The last thing she saw was the wolf's form beginning to shimmer and change, man and beast blurring together in the shadows of the Highland forest. Chapter 6. Castle MacFarland. Elena woke to the sound of voices speaking in the liquid Gaelic. Her eyelids felt heavy as lead, but she forced them open to find herself staring at unfamiliar stone walls. This wasn't her cottage. Panic shot through her as memories flooded back. Brennan's attack, the wolves, the agony of her bones breaking and reshaping. She tried to sit up, gasping as pain lanced through her left arm. Easy, lass, a woman's voice, speaking accented Scots. You've been through quite an ordeal. Elena turned her head to see an elderly Highland woman sitting beside the bed, her weathered hands busy with some herbal preparation. Where am I? Castle MacFarland, the woman replied. I'm Moira, the clan's healer. Elena's mind reeled. A Highland castle? Why bring me here? The chief ordered it, Moira said simply. You've been unconscious for 2 days. The chief? Elena tried to process this. Why would a Highland chief care about, 2 days? The full implications hit her. I have to go home. My daughter Lily is alone. She'll be terrified. Your wee one is here, Moira said quickly. Safe and well, I promise you. Before Elena could ask more, rapid Gaelic filled the room. Another woman had entered, younger, with the bearing of nobility. She spoke urgently to Moira, gesturing toward Elena with obvious agitation. What is she saying? Elena asked. She's asking who bit you, Moira said carefully. Elena frowned. Who bit me? Moira pointed to her neck. One of us did it, I can tell, and it is a crime among our kind. A crime? Elena stared at her. Such a bite should have killed you, Moira insisted. Elena shook her head. A bite doesn't kill people. That kind of bite does, Moira said grimly. Elena opened her mouth to answer, but then footsteps echoed in the corridor, and the younger woman said something sharp in Gaelic that made Moira's face go pale. He comes, she whispered. Who comes? Elena asked. The chief. Both Highland women suddenly straightened, their casual manner replaced by formal deference. The chief? Elena asked. I doubt your chief is about to walk into my... The door opened, and Elena's breath caught. A tall figure entered. For a moment she couldn't see his face clearly in the shadows of the doorway. This was clearly a man of importance, the way both women immediately bowed their heads. A Highland chief, as they claimed. But then the man stepped into the light, and Elena's world tilted. Rowan. The Highland warrior she'd bought at auction. The man who'd kissed her hand and left with a pack of wolves. Standing before her as the chief of Clan McFarland. You're the chief, she whispered, the words barely audible. The man she'd thought was just another clansman, another warrior among many. The man she'd saved was one of the most powerful figures in the Highlands. Those winter blue eyes found hers across the room, and she saw him tense at her recognition, at the shock that must be written across her face. For a moment Elena forgot the pain in her arm, forgot her confusion and fear. There was only Rowan, looking at her with an expression of such desperate relief that it made her chest tight. He crossed to her bedside slowly, as if she might vanish if he moved too quickly. When he reached her, he knelt beside the bed and carefully took her uninjured hand in both of his. Thank you, Elena whispered, squeezing his fingers. For the rescue. It was you, wasn't it? You came for me. He didn't understand her words, but something in her tone made his expression soften. He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles, just as he had that night by the forest when he'd left her. Elena's cheeks warmed at the tender gesture. For a moment they simply looked at each other, the air between them charged. But as he studied her face, his gaze drifted lower, and when his attention settled on her throat, his expression changed. Elena's hand flew instinctively to her neck, remembering how carefully she had arranged her hair to hide the marks that night he left. But now, her hair was loose, offering no concealment. Rowan went very still, his face draining of color. He spoke a single word in Gaelic, a question, urgent and disbelieving. Elena didn't understand the word, but she understood the horror in his voice. He reached toward her throat with trembling fingers, then stopped himself, his hand falling to his side, as if he didn't dare touch her. Moira stepped forward, speaking rapidly in Gaelic, her tone growing alarmed as she saw Rowan's expression. He responded sharply, and Elena heard her own name among the rapid words. What is it? Elena asked. What's wrong? Rowan turned to address Moira and the other woman, his tone sharp with authority, but underlaid with something that sounded like desperation. He's asking who did this to you, Moira translated carefully. Elena's hand moved instinctively to her neck, and she saw Rowan's eyes track the movement. Who did what? The bite, Moira sighed. He needs to know who marked you. Elena felt heat rise in her cheeks. Why does it matter? Rowan spoke again, more sharply this time, and Elena flinched at his tone. Immediately his expression softened. He spoke quickly to Moira, then reached toward Elena as if to comfort her before stopping himself. He apologizes, Moira said. He didn't mean to frighten you, but as I said, this is a grave crime among our people. Whoever did this to you will have to pay. Elena stared at Rowan, her fingers unconsciously tracing the faded marks on her throat. He must have seen the recognition in her face because he went very still and spoke a single word in Gaelic, barely more than a whisper. He's asking if it was him, Moira said, her voice barely audible. The silence stretched between them, heavy with dread. Elena met Rowan's eyes and saw her answer reflected in his expression before she even spoke. Yes, she whispered. tears beginning to spill down her cheeks. Rowan's face crumpled as if she'd struck him. He staggered backward, pressing his hands to his face, and when he spoke, it was in rapid, anguished Gaelic. "What is he saying?" Elena asked through her tears. He's saying he should have known, that he remembers fragments of that night, fevered dreams of—" Moira's cheeks reddened, "of claiming his mate. He thought it was delirium." Rowan sank to his knees beside her bed, reaching for her hand with trembling fingers. When she didn't pull away, he pressed her knuckles to his forehead, speaking in broken whispers. "He's asking for your forgiveness," Moira translated, "for doing this to you." "But I'm fine," Elena said, confusion mixing with her tears. "For now," Moira said grimly. "But such a bite. It should have killed you instantly. The fact that you've survived this long is a miracle. But make no mistake, child. Should you not complete your transformation, it will kill you." Chapter 7. The Choice. 3 days had passed since Elena learned the truth about Rowan's bite, and each one had been worse than the last. Lily had adapted to the strange new world with the resilience of childhood, explaining how the wolves that had rescued her had transformed into men right before her eyes. "I wasn't afraid, Mama," Lily had insisted. "When the silver wolf looked at me, his eyes were kind, like he knew us." Elena found the concept harder to accept. These Highlanders could turn into wolves, and Rowan was one of them. But she couldn't even ask him about it, not just because they didn't speak the same language, but because he was never there. In those first hours after waking, Elena had expected him to visit. After all, he had risked everything to save her. Instead, he remained conspicuously absent. "Where is he?" she finally asked Moira on the second day. "The chief has many responsibilities," Moira answered carefully. Elena nodded, trying to hide her disappointment. But as the hours turned to days, that disappointment curdled into something sharper. When Rowan finally did appear, it was always briefly, always with others present. He would speak to Moira in rapid Gaelic, asking questions that clearly pertained to Elena's condition, but his eyes never met hers directly. Does he regret saving me? The thought stung more than it should have. But what had she expected? That a Highland chief would develop feelings for a lowland widow he'd known for mere days? And on top of that, there was something else troubling her, something physical that she couldn't ignore. A restlessness had begun to plague her, an ache that started in her chest and spread through her limbs. It wasn't the pain of her injuries. This was different, deeper. At first, she attributed it to her unfamiliar surroundings, to worry about their situation. But it grew stronger each day, becoming almost unbearable whenever Rowan was near. Her heart would race when she heard his voice in the corridor. Her skin would flush when he entered her chamber. And when he left, she felt such emptiness that it took her breath away. What's wrong with me? She found herself listening for his footsteps, memorizing the cadence of his walk, the timbre of his voice. And then there were the dreams. Strange, vivid dreams where Rowan came to her chamber in the night, knelt beside her bed, and spoke to her in accented English she could somehow understand. Just dreams, she told herself upon waking, wishful thinking from a foolish woman. But the dreams felt more real than her waking hours. "What's happening to me?" she asked Moira on the 4th morning. "I can't sleep. I can't eat. There's this need inside me that I can't explain." Elena's cheeks burned with embarrassment. "It's worse when he's near. When Rowan visits." Moira sat heavily in the chair beside Elena's bed. "I was wondering when this would begin." "When what would begin?" "The bite," Moira said quietly. "It was a claiming bite, you see. It creates complications." Elena's hand flew to her neck. "What kind of complications?" "Among our people, a bite is sacred," Moira said. "It's how mates claim each other, creating a bond that lasts lifetimes. But humans aren't meant to survive such a bite. The fact that you have suggests what? That your body is trying to change, to become like us. Moira met Elena's eyes. And that ache you feel, the need for his presence, it's the incomplete bond calling to its other half. Elena stared at her. And him? Does he feel it too? Moira hesitated. He believes he's doomed you with his mark, that your suffering is his fault. That evening, Elena lay awake, staring at the ceiling, Moira's words echoing in her mind. An incomplete bond, a change her body was fighting. Near midnight, her chamber door opened silently. Elena turned her head, expecting to see Moira with another herbal remedy. Instead, Rowan stood in the doorway. He approached her bed like a man walking to his execution, his face etched with pain. When he knelt beside her, Elena could see tears tracking down his cheeks. "You came," she whispered. He spoke to her in Gaelic, words she couldn't understand, but that sounded like a confession, an apology, a prayer. His hands shook as he reached out to touch her face. "I don't know what you're saying," Elena said, but she leaned into his touch anyway, starved for even this contact. Rowan's response was broken, anguished. He pressed his forehead to hers and continued speaking in his native tongue. And though she couldn't translate the words, she could hear the despair in them. When he finally left, slipping away as silently as he'd come, Elena found herself crying. The next morning, when she mentioned his visit to Moira, the older woman looked confused. The chief didn't leave his chambers last night. The guards would have seen him. Elena's blood chilled. Had she dreamed it all? But she could still feel the echo of his touch on her skin, could still smell his scent lingering in her room. By the 5th day, Elena could barely leave her bed. The ache in her chest had become a constant companion. "Your magic," Moira said finally. "It's fighting the change. Your healing power keeps destroying the transformation before it can complete." "Is that good or bad?" Elena asked. The ancient healer's response was grim. "Bad. Your magic is using all your life force to fight the change. If this continues, you'll die from the effort." "Then what do I do?" "You must choose," the healer said. "Stop fighting and let the change happen. But most humans die in the transformation. Or keep fighting until your magic fails, and you die anyway." Elena stared at the two women. Those are my options? Die trying to transform, or die fighting it? "There is a small chance," Moira said reluctantly. "Tonight is the blood moon. If you've truly made your choice, this is our best chance." "What does the moon have to do with it?" "The ancients discovered a ritual," Moira explained, "to help witches who've been bitten." Elena opened her mouth to protest. "I am no witch. Only a healer." Moira sent her a dubious look. "If you weren't a witch, you'd most likely be dead. Your magic has kept you alive. And we celebrate magic here, child." Elena let her shoulders sag. She'd never thought she'd meet people who'd celebrate the very thing she was always told to hide. "The blood moon strengthens the wolf spirit, making the transition more survivable," Moira continued. "More survivable than 1 in 20? Elena asked bitterly. Moira's face softened. "Perhaps 1 in 10, with the ritual. It's your only hope." Die fighting the change, or die attempting it, Elena thought. Either way, she would likely never see Lily grow up, never learn whether the dreams of Rowan's midnight visits were real or fantasy. But as the ache in Elena's chest intensified, as her breath grew shorter and her strength continued to ebb, she realized she was running out of time to make the choice at all. An hour later, she found herself in a circular chamber beneath the castle. At the center stood a weathered altar, its surface smooth from generations of use. When Lily entered, Elena's composure nearly broke. Her daughter looked so small, so vulnerable amidst the strange symbols and shadowy chamber. "Mama?" Her voice trembled. "Are you really going to change?" Elena held her close. "I have to try, sweetheart. But if I don't survive, Moira will care for you. The clan has promised to protect you." When the door opened again, Elena expected Moira. Instead, Rowan stood in the doorway, his tall figure silhouetted against the torchlight. Elena's heart leapt, then plummeted as he entered with formal stiffness. He nodded to her but kept his distance, speaking briefly to the ancient healer in Gaelic. Elena fought down bitter disappointment. She had foolishly hoped he might offer comfort, perhaps even hold her hand through what could be her final moments. Instead, he stood rigid and watchful, present only because duty demanded it. The ancient healer approached with a ceremonial blade. "Your blood freely given," Moira translated, "to embrace the wolf within." Elena extended her palms. The blade bit into her flesh, her blood flowing into a stone bowl. "Now drink," Moira said. Elena hesitated, her eyes darting to Rowan. For the first time since entering, he looked directly at her, and the raw emotion in his gaze nearly undid her. Fear, guilt, and something deeper, something that looked terrifyingly like goodbye. He thinks I won't survive this, she realized. He's already mourning me. With that knowledge burning in her chest, Elena drank. The liquid burned like fire down her throat, spreading through her veins like molten metal. Then the pain hit. Not the gradual ache of her previous attacks, but immediate, overwhelming agony that tore a scream from her throat. Her back arched off the altar as her bones began to break and reshape. Through the haze of torment, she heard voices shouting in alarm. Elena's consciousness began to slip away, her life force draining with each tortured breath. She could feel herself dying, her magic and the transformation tearing her apart from within. "Hold my hand," she wanted to beg Rowan. "Please, just hold my hand." As if hearing her thoughts, he pushed past the others to kneel beside her. His anguished face swam before her fading vision, his lips forming words she couldn't understand. She reached for him, desperate for one last touch, but her body would no longer obey her commands. Her consciousness slipped away. Chapter 8. The Bond. Elena stood in a misty glen that felt familiar, though she'd never been there. "Rowan!" she called. He was walking ahead, away from her, toward a precipice that dropped into nothingness. She ran after him, catching his arm just as he reached the edge. "My heart," he breathed, turning to face her with wonder in his eyes. "In dreams we can speak truly, though I do not deserve the honor of your words." "What are you saying?" Elena asked, stunned. His face crumpled with anguish. "I've claimed you in madness when I was fevered, my beloved. I couldn't resist the call of our bond, and now I've destroyed you." "Our bond?" Elena whispered, the word carrying weight she was only beginning to understand. "The bond recognized what my conscious mind couldn't see," Rowan explained, his voice breaking. "You were always meant to be mine, as I was meant to be yours. That's why I bit you. Why my wolf claimed you despite my human will. You were my destined mate, and I poisoned you with my love." "You did no such thing," Elena protested. "Look how you fade," he protested. "What kind of man kills the woman he loves with his very touch? I cannot exist in a world where your light has been extinguished by my darkness. The bond that should have blessed us has become your death sentence." He pressed his hands to her face. "I've avoided you these 3 days to give you a fighting chance. I thought freed from our bond, your magic would perhaps be enough to save you. But I cannot let you die alone. I'll be with you soon, my heart, if you'll have me." Something cold settled in Elena's stomach. "What do you mean you'll be with me soon?" "In whatever realm awaits beyond, perhaps I can beg your forgiveness across eternity," Rowan said. Horror flooded Elena. He looked back at her one last time, his face ravaged by despair. "I love you, my heart. I'll never leave you again." And then, before Elena could stop it, he stepped backward into the void. Elena's eyes snapped open to gasps and exclamations. She was surrounded by tear-streaked faces. Lily, Moira, the ancient healer, and several Highland warriors, all staring at her as if she'd risen from the dead. "Mama!" Lily threw herself into Elena's arms, sobbing. "We thought you were gone. You weren't breathing. Your heart stopped." "I'm here," Elena said weakly. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she searched the faces around her. Rowan was nowhere to be seen. "Where is he?" The question tore from her throat. Her dream, the memory of Rowan's anguished face, his promise to follow her into death. Please let it have been just a dream. The warriors exchanged dark looks. One spoke in Gaelic, his tone heavy with finality. Elena's blood turned to ice. "They've taken him to the sacred grove," Moira translated, her voice breaking. "For execution, on his orders." A scream tore from Elena's throat. The dream hadn't been a dream at all. It had been real. Rowan's goodbye, his promise to follow her into death, his step into the void. He meant it. Elena struggled to sit up, desperation and newfound strength surging through her transformed body. "How far can we reach them?" "It's too late," Moira said sadly. "They left at dawn for the grove of the first wolves. It's half a day's ride, and by ancient law, no one may interfere once the ritual begins." Elena felt a primal growl building in her chest. "I am not no one." She pushed herself out of bed, ignoring Lily's protests and Moira's warnings. Her legs shook beneath her, but she forced herself toward the door. "Elena, you're too weak," Moira began. "He's going to die thinking I'm dead," Elena said fiercely. "I won't let that happen." She stumbled from the chamber and down the castle corridors, her bare feet slapping against cold stone. Every step was agony. Her body felt like it had been torn apart and badly reassembled. "I'm not fast enough. I'm not strong enough." Elena burst from the castle, into the Highland morning, gasping at the shock of cold air. The sacred grove was miles away through rough terrain. In her current state, barely able to walk without swaying, she'd never make it in time. But she had to try. She began to run, or what passed for running with her unsteady legs. Within minutes, she was stumbling, falling to her knees on the rocky path, her body betraying her desperate will. Get up and run." Behind her, she could hear voices calling, Moira, Lily, the warriors. But she didn't turn back. She ran until her lungs burned and her legs gave out again. Got up and ran some more. "I'm too late. I'm too weak. He's going to die." Elena felt tears streaming down her face as she forced her failing body forward. I love him, and I'm going to lose him because I'm not strong enough." Elena tried to push herself up and collapsed again. Her magic-drained body simply had nothing left to give. She lay there on the Highland earth, gasping and broken, feeling Rowan's pain through their bond, and knowing she had failed. "No!" The word blazed through her mind with desperate fury. "No, I will not let him die." Something shifted deep inside her. Not her magic this time, but something else entirely. The wolf spirit that had been fighting for dominance, waiting for her to stop resisting. "Let go," she told herself. "Stop fighting. Let it happen." Pain exploded through her body as bones cracked and reformed, but she gritted her teeth and held on. Her spine elongated, muscles tearing and rebuilding. But instead of unconsciousness, there was power. Wild, primal, magnificent power flowing through her transformed form. When the agony faded, Elena stood on 4 legs, with silver-white fur and golden eyes that could see for miles. The transformation felt as natural as breathing, as if this had always been her true form. Without another thought, she bounded across the Highland landscape, covering ground that would have taken a horse hours in mere minutes. Her new senses guided her, the scent trail of the pack, the pull of the bond that connected her to Rowan's heart, and the desperate need to reach him before it was too late. The sacred grove called to something ancient in her blood, and she followed that call through forest and glen until she burst into a clearing where ancient stones stood in a circle. The pack was there, dozens of wolves surrounding a raised stone altar. And on that altar, Rowan knelt in human form, his head bowed in acceptance as an ancient elder of the pack approached with a silver axe. Elena shifted back to human form without conscious thought, her voice carrying across the grove with supernatural power. "Stop!" the ancient elder snarled, but Rowan's eyes widened in shock. "She lives," someone whispered. Elena walked into the circle, and the pack parted before her like water. She had eyes only for Rowan, who stared at her as if she were a vision. "I'm here," Elena told him. Tears streamed down his face as he reached. For her, his hands trembling as they cupped her cheeks. He spoke again in his own tongue, words that sounded like prayers or pleas. Elena didn't understand, but her new wolf senses could smell his scent, could hear his heartbeat. Her gaze fixed on his throat, where she could see his pulse beating beneath his pale skin. The wolf in her recognized him, her mate, her other half. Rowan's eyes met hers, and then his head tilted back, baring his throat in the ancient gesture of invitation. No words were needed. This was older than language, deeper than human understanding. Wolf calling to wolf, mate to mate. Elena moved on pure instinct, breathing in his scent. She could smell his fear, his love, his desperate hope. All of it mixing into something that made her wolf spirit sing with recognition. When her teeth found the spot where his neck met his shoulder, it wasn't gentle or hesitant. She bit down with supernatural strength, tasting copper and magic and the wild essence that made him hers. Rowan's body arched beneath her, a sound escaping him that was half human groan, half wolf howl. The moment her teeth pierced his skin, the world exploded into sensations so intense it bordered on violence. Their minds crashed together, not the gentle touching of souls she'd imagined, but a collision of two fierce spirits recognizing their other half. His emotions flooded through her, relief so profound it was painful, love so desperate it burned, and beneath it all, the wild joy of a wolf finally reunited with his mate. "Mine," her consciousness snarled possessively as his life force poured into her. "Yours," came his fierce response, carrying with it 1,000 unspoken promises. "The bond is complete," the ancient elder said in wonder. "She lives. The first human to survive the claiming in centuries." Elena looked into Rowan's eyes and saw her own fierce joy reflected there. They were no longer two separate beings. They were mated wolves, bound by magic older than civilization. The pack around them cheered in celebration of a miracle. Their alpha had found his true mate, and she had proven strong enough to survive the claiming. In that moment, surrounded by the wild music of her new family, Elena understood she had found where she truly belonged. Not in the civilized world that had feared her gifts, but here in the ancient places where magic ran free, and love could transcend the boundaries between human and wolf. She was home, at last. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed the story. If you'd like more tales of magic, transformation, and destiny, please like and subscribe. Your support truly means the world to me.